I would like to run down our panel here and do a little quick introduction. To my immediate left, Tara Carver, Jared Kylo, Rebecca Foray, and Ruben Honig. And to start us off, and this is my maiden voyage here as a panel moderator, and I was told my first question was terrible, so I'm going to cross that one out. But I would like to sort of go down the row and have everyone have a chance to sort of give their background, where they're from, and how long they've been involved in the industry.
Awesome. Can you guys all hear me? Thank you, Alex, and I'm excited to be up here with the three of you. Hi, my name is Tara Carver. I'm the Executive Director of the Humboldt County Growers Alliance. We represent 250 plant-touching members. The vast majority of them are cultivators or farmers. But we also have manufacturers, retailers, distributors, testing labs in our ranks as well. I come from the industry. I'm a cannabis farmer by trade, became a policy wonk by necessity. Legalization kind of blew through Humboldt, and we all had to really step up. But when we think about communication, we didn't think about communication, honestly. Like, I was brought up in an era of the less communication, the better, because you stayed safe. And so we've swung the pendulum on this whole legalization thing and having to actually talk about what we do and what regulation does and how it impacts us. And so I probably have the least amount of experience in communication, but I've found that if you have fun with it, it actually works. And so far, we've been pretty successful in Humboldt. So I'm here to say thank you.
Thanks, Tara. Jared Kylo, I'm the president of the United Cannabis Business Association. We are a trade organization comprised mostly of retailers, but like a lot of retailers, there are quite a lot of other points inside the supply chain that they take on, but we definitely prioritize and wear the hat of retailers. Most of the work that I've done, I started here in San Francisco about 18 years ago, so it's nice to still be in my hometown and still doing this, but I do operate in Los Angeles quite a bit, which I enjoy, but I definitely enjoy coming home. And also being a part of this industry, communications has been the biggest part of a retailer because we had a green cross on a street for quite a few years. You don't get the opportunity to hide. I mean, I sat on the medical marijuana task force here under Gavin Newsom years ago, and it was awesome to have someone who believed in us enough to give us a space inside of City Hall to actually have communication, have public hearings, and really try to go through really good standard operating procedures and give best business practices. So that was a way that we got to communicate to our regulators, and we got to tell them what was needed and what the best business practices were going to be, and having subcommittees. That communication has been, pivotal in being able to run a trade organization, because now I had the foundation of how you can communicate with a kind of a legislator that really wants to listen. And it seems like ever since then we've kind of been pushing an agenda to try to make sure people listen. And this is now an opportunity where everyone is here trying to find out what the stakeholders and legacy operators have done over years and how do we protect that legacy. So I just appreciate the opportunity to continue to communicate to people and trying to get our message across. So thank you for the opportunity of this panel.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Foray. I'm the Communications Manager for the California Department of Food and Agriculture's Cannabis Cultivation Licensing Division, one of the longest titles I've ever had in my life.
It's quite a business card.
I think I was employee number 6 or so for the Cannabis division, so I've been here from the beginning, essentially. And we license the cannabis farmers. That's our job. We are here to help them get through the licensing process. We know it's not easy, as Lori mentioned earlier. It's a process we're constantly reviewing and trying to improve, and the stakeholder feedback we get is so helpful to that. As of this morning, I just thought I would share that we have licensed 5,214 cannabis cultivators in the state, and we are down to about 600 pending applications. So we've made a lot of progress. Before I came to Cannabis, I worked in the Senate as their communications director in public policy on many areas, including agriculture, and I worked at the Sierra Club and as communications director of companies, divisions of Amazon.com and book publishing. So I have a long communications background. But this has been one of the most exciting, constantly changing communications positions I think that Alex and I have probably been in, because it's just the ground is always moving and the laws are changing, and we're trying to keep up just as much as everybody else is. So, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ruben Honig. I am co-founder of Cirrus Strategies. It's a consulting firm that has been around since 2016. I have been in the industry for 5 years, originally moving, I'm from Massachusetts originally, but moving from Florida 5-6 years ago. It was actually 5 years this past December for actually safe access as a medical patient. So originally got into the industry, with extreme concerns that people weren't getting in other states or California, as I moved to California where they have had a very long-standing medical program, I kind of stepped into that, but then looking at other states, seeing that, there wasn't that kind of access and people, really needing to figure that out, and I remember, going to dispensaries when I just showed up in Los Angeles, and I know Jared spoke about this, about dispensaries, kind of being the front line and communicating with patients, but it was interesting. I started to see, how bud tenders, how people were actually communicating with people. It was wild. The people I would see would come into a dispensary and say, this was my wife has stage 4 cancer. This is our last opportunity. This is the last thing, that we can do. And what do you do? And what do we do? And then there was kind of this, depending on who you speak to, depending on who you do, who you're getting advice from, it was kind of, it wasn't standardized, right? I do more work on local licensing, policy work at the state, locally in the city of Los Angeles. I'm based in LA. Have done a lot of trade association work where communication is key, communicating with policymakers, communicating internally with membership, and I appreciate this conference and our moderator, Alex Traverso.
So I was given the sort of the leeway to select what the panel was going to be, who was going to be on this panel, and so obviously I picked the people that I'm a fan of their work, and I think that they all represent sort of an interesting. They all come from interesting backgrounds, and they all have to communicate with different audiences. And so, as I think a lot of us know, the way you reach a grower versus a retailer versus just a general stakeholder, there's many different tactics, many different ways of communication, and so I'm really interested in just kind of hearing some of the different challenges that we all sort of face in our day-to-day lives and trying to communicate with folks. So, I mean, I think, as much as I want this to be sort of freewheeling and everyone jump in where they can, I think I want to start with Jared on this one, just because he's not only a business owner, but he does represent a trade association, and I think there are different challenges that come with that. So, and I'll let you take it away.
Well, I mean, when we're trying to deal with a market that is now transitioning, you went from absolutely no regulations and in the attempt to hide, and now when you transition to probably the most regulated product that we can think of now in California, trying to get those people to transition has been one of the most difficult parts, because they're trying to keep their business going. They're trying to understand OSHA certifications. They're trying to make sure that they did the sexual harassment, studies. I mean, we've got all of these things to think about, and then I come in as the president of this organization talking about regulations, possible labor unions, what labor peace agreements are there, and it is overwhelming for most to even try to hear all the things that we have to transition to them. And so when you try to give them a safe place to say, okay, how can I boil this down to what your biggest needs are, and how do you create priorities? Now, our organization has done a good job of keeping 3 or 4 priorities at the top of our list, saying we have to deal with these first before we move on. And that's been a great way of communicating to people who feel like they're frazzled by all the information they need to absorb. And then they start to look at how much they're spending on legal counsel and on consulting fees. And so trying to be a trade organization that funnels all that information, lowers those costs, and reduces those barriers, because I'm sitting in a seat that says, I have the exact same issues you do as a retailer. I also have to survive, and here's the things I'm doing as a retailer. And when you sit in a room of everyone having the same needs, a lot of conversation from that is what really builds up kind of a community. And that's what I really wanted in Los Angeles. You know, being in Northern California, community was just how you lived. I mean, you didn't have people come and trim at your grow op unless you knew them or they were a friend of a friend. And so trying to establish that Northern California style of community in Southern California was a little difficult. Everyone's like, what are you doing here? Like, why are you in Los Angeles? I'm sorry, but we usually fight with each other. How are we going to love each other? And I realize that may sound a little bit soft and like, you know, but the point is, we all want to feel comfort with each other. And so being in a group and allowing each other to express each other's needs and then offering possible solutions has been what this group why we've stayed together. I mean, we spent millions of dollars passing an ordinance in the city of Los Angeles, Measure M, and like as a trade organization, trying to get people to pull millions of dollars out of their pockets, telling them that this is the pathway to their future success is not an easy conversation. Explaining how to get 109,000 signatures to qualify an ordinance in the city of LA is not something that most people understand. And so that's been the hardest part about running an organization of transitional business owners was how do I prioritize what is most important to them? How do I allocate their resources and funds to the most important parts and really transition them into a space where they feel comfortable and putting that kind of, you know, publicity out. Most of my members wanted to hide for the first 5 and 6 years of being in this organization. And how do you get them to come out of the shadows and really stand up for their business, stand up for their industry, and also stand up for their community that we built? And now that we have this nice community, we feel there's a sense of comfort. Once that comfort's there, now we try to go, okay, here's the hard questions we have to answer again today. Like, what labor unions do you really want to work with? Which ones do you think are going to represent your needs the best? And, you know, it's not easy to talk about politics in front of a group of people who have never voted. And that's sometimes a problem, too, because we stayed out of the limelight for so many years. Then to expect all of these people to engage fully has been a really difficult process. But, you know, I think we're in a place now where people are proud of the work they do. They're proud to like tell their parents and everyone that they own a dispensary. We don't have to hide anymore. Remember when people used to ask me what I did? I used to tell them everything else but cannabis. And now it's like the first thing I say when people say, what do you do? It's like, I'm proud of the cannabis work I do. I'm proud to be in this industry. And I think what happened now is that communication of pride is what's really pushing a lot of my members to be out there, to go hit the streets and make sure their neighborhood councils understand the good work they do. That is truly what did this. Pride and ownership of a legal industry and feeling like you don't have to look over your shoulders wondering when the police are going to come back. That has changed the view of a lot of people inside the retail space. We've been the front lines for a lot because, you know, in Humboldt it was helicopters. In Los Angeles it was any time a police officer drove by, everyone clenched up because you never knew if you were going to be subjective to them coming into your shop, whether you thought you were illegal or not. Prop D in Los Angeles was a mess and left everyone in this gray area for such a long time. So now to feel like we're supported by our city, to feel like we're supported by our state, and also to see the country move, that communication has become so much easier because I don't have to convince people that we have something good to build from. It's being built right now, and these regulations have really helped. So that's probably the best thing I can say about like the communications now
Right.
style.
So I have a question specific to growers that I want to ask, but I took cold medicine before I came here, and I have a question that I want to ask Ruben that I'm going to forget if I don't ask him really quickly here. So the question is really more about if you have clients that you're representing. Sometimes I think, based on the state of the industry and where we're at right now, that things are a little difficult. Communication can sometimes be a nice to have. So I'm wondering what do you tell a client who maybe doesn't have the resources to bring on communication strategy or a communicator? I mean, how do you advise them to sort of do that work on their own?
Did you take Dayquil or NyQuil?
I believe it's daytime, so I took the day.
Very good. It's very complicated. I mean, I don't know any other way to say that we're dealing with an unprecedented landscape where, well, when it comes on to the communications side, I don't necessarily see the value right now for businesses. On the business side, there are so many things that businesses, as we're seeing, the industry is kind of it's contracting. We're seeing a lot of layoffs in the industry. We're seeing a lot of issues going on now, and we're seeing a lot of successes at the same time. I think it's easy to lament and really pile on, right? And say, oh, everything is horrible. It's a crisis. It's the worst. We're all going to die, and everything is, But going out there and talking to people. There's a lot of stories out there. There's a lot of people, that aren't putting out press releases when they raise a bunch of money, right? They're not saying, oh, I have $100 million. Oh, I have $200 million. They're quietly, building their businesses 1, 2, 3 steps at a time, and not, necessarily getting ahead of things. Communicating with local governments, complicated. Again, as we probably all know here, there is a shortage of licensed dispensaries across the state. There are areas that don't have them. We do see a lot of dispensaries in bigger municipal areas. But also, on the other side of that coin, we're seeing that those stores, depending on levels of enforcement and levels of taxation and different inputs, we're seeing, stores barely touch the outer realm of their ability, of their capacity. It's unfortunate to see people not wanting to go to stores. I think Los Angeles has a great opportunity to communicate with the public through public education. We have seen Weedwise at the state. The city of Los Angeles still has $750,000 sitting inside of some sort of.
Thank you for that campaign plug, by the way.
Yeah,
I
I'll
appreciate
give you a
that.
plug all day, every day. But when are we going to communicate more effectively with the consumer, with the public? Maybe I'm on my own island all the way over here, but I think that there's a large majority of people that think since Prop 64 passed, everything is legal, right?
Yeah, and I think that segues into the question for how to communicate with growers too. And I want to get Tara's thought on that, and then I want to talk to Rebecca a little bit about that as well, because Cal Cannabis has its own PR campaign that is focused on reaching cultivators, and it's not as easy as potentially the one that we're talking about with Weedwise and reaching retailers, because there's so much more out in the forefront of things. So speaking to growers, I think the Humboldt County Growers Alliance does a great job in their communications. Member appreciation posts are always fun. So
Sure. So Humboldt County has a long history, 60 plus years of rebel, outrageous, outlaw cannabis farmers, and we're very prideful of our work. But being a rebel, outrageous, loud cannabis farmer now, I have found we have to kind of tone it back a little bit when we're talking to the policymakers. And so my struggle sometimes with communication is taking my amazing membership and all their outrageous stories and asking them to be very professional when you go in and talking to your local government about taxes, instead of coming in with protest signs and banging down the door and locking yourself to the chair. We've had to rearrange a bit of our strategy. But I guess when I think about growers and communicating with growers from heritage regions in California, humor is the best way to get a message across, in my opinion. Again, because we can be so serious and outrageous and loud, if you can tone it down with a little bit of humor, it really makes the communication style very personal. And I like to kind of think of our members, they're very passionate, they're artists. And so if you can communicate to them on a level of basic humanity, they respond really well. So that's been my trick.
And I think that's great, because that's ordinarily what I would shoot for as well at the Bureau, is sort of a fun conversational style. Unfortunately, that the state kind of frowns upon that sometimes. You can't have too much fun because it's not approved. So in that, I'd like to hear Rebecca's perspective, because I know she feels my pain on a regular basis as well. So getting her perspective on the regulator side of things, and maybe talking a little bit about the campaign that you guys have with Food and Ag.
Sure. We have an industry awareness campaign that is going to unroll very soon. There'll be an announcement in a few weeks where we're going to talk about the merits of being a licensed cannabis farmer in the state and talking to other farmers who are licensed who will share their stories up and down the state. And we have been working very hard on that, and we're looking forward to launching that soon. I wanted to add that, and Alex and I are always on the front lines of working with the reporters who do a really good job of keeping on top of everything. It's a demanding beat covering cannabis, but as former journalists and reporters, we also know the importance of getting back to people really quickly, finding the information that's needed so that everybody out there can get the latest breaking news. We've also had surveys at the Department of Food and Ag asking farmers, how do you want to get your information? What's the best way to get it to you? And social media has been very popular. We have now at Food and Ag, we have an Instagram channel, which Food and Ag just celebrated its 100th anniversary last year. They never had an Instagram channel, but the cannabis farmers said they love to look at the beautiful photographs of their plants, and so we added Instagram to that collection of social media channels. And then we also recently added a Twitter Espanol channel, and we have a bilingual person on staff to reach out to some of the Spanish farmers, and we've been doing more with Hmong farmers as well. And again, that's from the stakeholder feedback that we've been getting. So we really do listen to the feedback that we get from you. There's a lot of material we put out for people to read, FAQs, fact sheets, but not everybody is a reader. So we're also doing more short videos, we're doing podcasts, we're doing more photo essays and things like that. So we do listen to how people want their information, and we do radio talk shows, we do news shows on television, and we just try all avenues to get out there and get the message heard.
So and speaking about sort of feedback and in your communications, and maybe some things that I would like to mention in our realm at the BCC. So we started out, and I've been at this for a little over 3 years now. And so we set up our social media channels, and I think initially when we started out, I think there was sort of the general feeling was we're getting the benefit of the doubt, right? Let's wait and see how this thing rolls out. And over the course of 3 years, I think the tide has turned a little bit on us. And so in terms of speaking about challenges and some of the feedback you receive in your communications, I think one thing that stuck out to me the other day, and I read everything, so I see everything that people comment on our posts and things we put out there. And somebody just said, you've got to hand it to the BCC. They continue to put this shit out, even though everyone's killing them, right? Like we're getting lit up on a regular basis. Everything we put out there, you're terrible people, all this stuff. Those are the challenges we deal with on a regular basis, because you have to continue to put information out there. You can't just go dark because you're getting this negative feedback. So I'd like to just sort of run down the panel and talk about some of the feedback you've received, some of the feedback, good or bad, that you've received in your communications programs, and maybe some of the challenges that you just face on a regular basis.
Sure. So I think, I'm just going to say it, we can all agree that the input of information that we have to turn around and churn out is a lot. And so whether it's the BCC, Cal Cannabis, other trade associations, news articles, it is a constant move. For us, we're a scrappy grassroots organization. Like, we don't have $100 billion, million, trillion, zero budget. Like, there's 3 of us, and one of our biggest challenges has actually come down to finding a graphic designer who's not in-house. And so meaning that we can't get a graphic designer to be able to be on call. And we've been doing this for 3.5 years. And we started local, and then we outsourced to San Francisco, and then we outsourced to New York. We literally have a gentleman in Serbia right now turning over our graphic design work, because I can't find one in the United States. We'll talk later. I've got some things to say on this issue. I have, and so
this is great. We're making connections
we're
right
making
now.
Connections.
I like this.
I love it. I mean, Alexia is going to be really bummed. He's great, but nonetheless. So turning over that information, and so if I can't get the Instagram post, because that's how our rural farmers communicate, and thank you so much for hearing us on that. It's been such a big deal for us. If I can't get that Instagram post out within 48 hours, sometimes the policy will change. And now I've paid for it, it's not relevant anymore, and I have to go pay for it again. And then I've had issues that have changed so rapidly that I've had 3 posts that are all worthless. So that's our biggest issue.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it was interesting because we stood out really quickly in Los Angeles in trying to make regulations like legal. Dealing with that gray area for such few years, quite a few years, we kind of went like, okay, we're going to jump out and make this happen. So we wrote an ordinance, and immediately, as soon as we wrote an ordinance, we were the target of just about everyone. We were called monopolistic. We were called deeply entrenched in trying to make sure that no one else could enter the market. What happens is when you stick your neck out, everyone loves to point a finger that you're the bad guy, you're the bad girl, you're the one who's come out here and trying to take over the industry with your words and your ballot measures. And so that was initially how we got started. The first thing was like, wow, here's a 53-page ballot initiative in the city of Los Angeles, and we're being called monopolistic. We're like, we're just trying to make sure that the legal part of this industry continues to grow. And even to today, even when we have, a retail expansion bill that we've been trying to run this whole, this year, we're still being called monopolistic as an organization because we represent a small section of license holders inside the retail segment. And the thought is that we're not trying to grow this industry because we want it all for ourselves, which is, it's a difficult part to have to try to communicate to people. Like, it's hard to be monopolistic when you have a dispensary in Los Angeles. Am I really taking over the Northern California market with my dispensary in LA? And it's like, I think the communication is like, I really only have reach about 5 or 6 miles from the center of my dispensary, so how can I be monopolistic? And I think the thing is, with this kind of communication style, people love to break you down and say that you're bad so they can elevate themselves. And trying to kind of elevate yourself above that chatter, because in the positions we're in, elevating yourself over people who are trying to just hate on the work that you're doing, you can't just dive into that every time and lose sleep over the fact that people don't like you. You have to stay focused. You have to keep your group focused. And whenever someone says something negative about you, you need to take it in and see if that's true. And if it doesn't feel true to you, you have to shed it off and not feel like you have to continue to answer that same negative feedback. So that's been the biggest challenge for us, especially in Los Angeles, is to really take that negative feedback and push it out and really just try to be productive.
Tara, I wanted to let you know that we have a lot of free graphic artists responding on our Instagram page. They're getting very creative with emojis. And they communicate very well what they're not happy about with sometimes R-rated emojis. And you can have a lot of fun looking at those. But we want to hear the good and the bad. We want to get all the feedback because we do go back and figure out, okay, a lot of people aren't liking this. How can we make it better? How can we change it? And the change takes a while sometimes, but we are listening, and we always welcome the feedback, whether it's on social media or calling Food and Ag. We have a toll-free 1-833-CAL-GROW phone number. We do invite that. We appreciate talking to the stakeholders, and I just want to throw out also, some people just like to have one-on-one conversations with the experts in licensing. And thanks to my partners at Fish and Wildlife who are here today and the water boards, we are doing about a dozen free cultivation licensing workshops across the state just for this first half of the year. We will have more. We've tried doing online workshops. We did one, we're gonna do another one on February 21st. And that allows people in remote areas to also look at, maybe they can't make it to LA or San Francisco or some parts of Humboldt, or wherever we might be. So we're trying this, and it was very effective the first time, so we're doing it again. And all of this is posted on our social media, and it's on our online calendars, so you can plan accordingly. But we do welcome the feedback, good and bad. So thank you for everybody's comments.
You left me at the end, didn't you? All right. So I think that one thing I wanted to bring up is, and this actually was interesting, in another trade association, the LA Cannabis Task Force that I helped found, and really kind of got to know the ins and outs of cannabis, got to know the ins and outs of LA local policy, some state policy. But what I learned, many years ago, which is in cannabis years, not in human years, but you need to communicate with the state. The way that you communicate with the state is different than the way you communicate with the city of Los Angeles is different than you communicate with the city of San Diego, than you communicate with San Jose. We got into a position where, we placed an article or had some quotes that were, a little bit inflammatory in the city of Los Angeles. And, when you do stuff like that, then the council member just cuts you off. We're like, we're not talking to you anymore. And that's it. At the state, we were, with my former business partner, she came from the state and she was, more aggressive with kind of her positioning. And it was almost like, oh, come on, these people are being babies. But at the same time, you have to be very conscious of your audience, and it is very, very easy to make a communication snafu. And, people are sensitive, people are emotional. The cannabis industry, I think it's tough right now because when you're in it every single day and you're working in the industry, be it, ancillary licensees, it's hard to kind of take a step back and see perspective of, well, if I care so much about this, do the people at the state care as much as I do?
Right, and I think, to your point, I think all of us on a regular basis are so sort of entrenched in what we're doing that sometimes there are opportunities out there for different tactics or different ways of doing things that we may not be able to capitalize on, utilize, whatever it is. And case in point, a couple weeks ago we were at a different event and there was a regulator from Oregon there, and they were talking about they have a podcast. And so my boss afterward comes to me and says, well, what do you think? What if we had a California podcast? And I was like, are you serious? When that thing goes through the editing and the review process, it'd be like a Valium at the end of the day, right? It would put people to sleep. So but these are things that you think about as possibilities, right? These are things that are out there. So this will be, the next couple questions are just going to sort of serve as the lightning round here before we wrap up. So in terms of opportunities, are there opportunities that you would like to explore, and what might they be going forward?
Sumo wrestling at the state capitol for stakeholders on issues. I think it's a great idea. We can fundraise off of it and donate to charities. This industry is extremely emotional, reactive, and hyper engaged, which is good. It's not a bad thing. So as far as state regulators, I think you should host those sumo wrestling matches.
Done.
Cool.
I think it's tough to have everyone's voice be heard. It'd be really nice if we could kind of do some more like video conference calls so that the BCC and people can ask questions directly of regulators in kind of a digital format, so that we don't have to come to, drive, find parking, get a hotel room to ask, a regulator questions. And I think sometimes in the group setting, it is nice to hear other people ask questions you probably were fearful of asking because you think it's stupid, but then all of a sudden that question gets asked. So I think that kind of larger group video conference would be really nice for people to ask questions. Just calling someone on a phone, you don't get to see facial expressions or anything, so you don't know how to judge if your question is well received or heard. So I think some video stuff would be really nice for us.
And we're actually going to be doing more videos, short videos on social media, because we found that they're very effective. People are really busy, they don't have a lot of time. So we really analyze what are the questions that are most often asked, and we can get those out there, like the top 3 and the answers. And if you need more information, where to go. We just redesigned our website recently, trying to make it easier to navigate where to find what you need. Absent making a call or sending an email, which of course you can also do. But that's something that we work on very hard at the Food and Ag.
I do want to vote for sumo wrestling first, though, honestly. Yeah.
Every issue, we just throw down.
I heard the question, then Tara said sumo wrestling, and then I lost the question. Alex, we're the speed round.
I don't think it matters anymore, really.
Does it
It's
not,
fine.
Does it not matter? I would like to see more collaboration. That's all. I think that between trade associations, between stakeholders, and the state, BCC, CDFA, CDPH, the consolidated version of whatever we're going to see next year, potentially, yes. I think that
Who knows?
who knows, work, and even like give, there's just, it's very complicated. There's a lot of regulations. There's a lot of compliance issues. There's a big drop off right now with metric. People are having, the state is politely, being a little bit lenient with it, but at the same time, it's fair to say, that there is all these different things that are just making it more difficult to just run a business. So I think that more collaboration between the state and stakeholders to put more information out so people can have a baseline understanding of things, so they don't have to necessarily hire a high-priced or mid-priced or low-priced consultant, or they don't have to, deal with their lawyers. And I understand people have to run their businesses too, with ancillary businesses or people that are not licensees. But there should be a level of just a baseline of this information that people can get, and it can actually, they don't have to hire multiple people and just
This is all good feedback. Thank you.
keep their
But
costs
keep
going.
the critiques coming. Keep them coming.
Like it, collaborate.
So obviously with this particular panel, I'm fans of all the work of these folks on the panel, but I want to also give everyone the opportunity to talk a little bit about like who's doing a communications program that you actually pay attention to and think is doing a good job. And not everyone needs to say the Bureau of Cannabis Control at the same time, so it's fine. But who do you think, whose communications do you follow and say, like, these people are actually doing a great job? And this is, if I was telling someone or if I was advising someone on, how to run an effective communications program, who would I point them to? What do you think?
I could just.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You start this time. That's fine. Fine.
I have actually no one to give you that's doing it, and not in a bad way, but it's like I think that what we're seeing now is, with businesses that are not doing well, laying off employees, they're signaling to their investors, signaling to the Canadian stock market, signaling to whoever, they're all their businesses, their employees, that they. It's nuanced, and I think that crisis communications actually is and I use that term loosely, but the way that you message, be it Ease or be it Weed Maps or be it whoever it is or whatever company, there's a nuanced way to communicate, and there are ways to to put the truth out there and not kind of skirt around it, but at the same time be savvy about it. So I think I'm not to judge anything that's out there right now, but it's an important part, I think, of businesses right now in this downturn, to be able to communicate with the public effectively and not necessarily, say, oh, we're in the gutter. Sorry, that sucks. That's. Yeah.
Rebecca, what do you think?
I would say for the Food and Ag's Cal Cannabis Division, I look a lot at the New York Times. I love the New York Times briefings, the one paragraph summary. This is what you need to know right now. And if you want a really deep dive, click here. We're doing more of that. We're giving you that bite-sized bit of information. And then if you want to know all the nuts and bolts, we'll have a link that takes you there. And we're doing that on social media. We're doing that on our website. We're doing that with email alerts. We work with the Bureau and Department of Public Health and doing that as well. But they just do such a great job of that. And so that's something that I look at constantly. We don't have their budget, but we still aim high.
Honestly, I think David Downs and Leafly are killing it right now for all the investigative reporting.
Agreed.
So honestly,
100%.
I can't even tell you how many times I quote Leafly and David Downs's articles. It's very helpful when I go into regulators. We all have some of the same information. It's a trusted source. They have taken all the illegals off their site March in 2018, really leading the kind of advertisers. So my hat's off to Leafly and David Downs. I really appreciate your work.
Yeah, I would second that. I mean, just even outside of cannabis, there's so much information being thrown at all of us. I'm looking out here right now, and each and every one of you who's got a cell phone, you're downloading information, and the platforms are so vast, and it's just overwhelming. And so, credible journalism is what I have found to be the savior so far of keeping our mental health okay in this space, because there's so much misinformation, so much, and there's so much opportunity to have misinformation, and that can make or break a business, a trade association, or the reputation of a government agency. And so credible journalism all the way.
So on that point, and I want to sort of maybe we conclude with this, but in terms of, I mean, the whole point of this panel and discussing the fact that words do matter, right, and the level of information that's coming out, and things are changing and happening so quickly that there is, you have to be hyper focused on what you're putting out there, because things can mean different things to different people. So is there anything that any of us right now would like to, is there a misconception that we would like to clear up in front of this fine cast of characters in the crowd, starting with Ms. Carver?
I don't hate hemp. There's a misconception that I hate hemp. I don't,
Yeah.
not at all.
I didn't raise your taxes either. I didn't do it. I didn't do that.
No, you didn't, and I've been trying to tell people that.
Thank
They don't want to hear it. They still believe that you did that. I come from Humboldt County. We strongly believe in hemp production. We truly believe it can solve a lot of the world's climate crisis issues right now. We just absolutely do not want it grown in Humboldt County. We will not cross-pollinate our genetics. So there's a misconception that I hate hemp. Specifically me too. I'm hearing it out in the ethos. But no, I love hemp, just not in Humboldt.
Wow, I'd love to build on the hemp conversation, because AB 228 was something that we stopped last year because they would not give testing parity to cannabis. I was not going to allow a product to sit on my shelf that was untested, like the product right next to it. I'm trying to build for my consumers. Health and safety was a big deal, and so I hope this year Aguilar Curry takes AB 228 and looks at it and gets parity for testing, because I would love low-cost CBDs to be available to every single patient that wants them and needs them. We need higher production of it, but we can't let it slip into the state of California under the ruse that it's just going to be safe for human consumption. It needs to be tested the same as cannabis. I think it's the right thing to do, and I think we need it here. So, and I hope that's a misconception too. It's like I'm trying to keep hemp and CBDs out of the market. I'm just trying to provide for my consumers in a safe and effective way. And since I've been doing that for 18 years for cannabis, I would hate for someone to just slip in and in a couple of months be able to get underneath all the testing regulations. So that's another misconception I think that I'd like to kind of get out there.
One of the questions we get asked the most often is, for those who have a provisional cannabis cultivation license, do they need to get credentialed into and learn how to use the California Cannabis Track and Trace metric system? And I think there was some confusion early on, because with temporary licenses, that wasn't the requirement, but now with all provisional and annual licenses, you do need to get credentialed into the metric system. This is a program that is managed by the Department of Food and Ag, and we do have step-by-step guides, videos. We're about to publish a webinar and fact sheets and to help people go through that, but I just want to make that clear. And then sometimes some of the errors that get published get repeated in future articles, and one of them is that the metric system went live on as scheduled on January 2nd, 2018, but I keep seeing 2019, I keep seeing January 2020, it just went live, and it was January 2018, and the team that killed themselves to get it live was very, very proud of that fact, but it is an area where we have a lot of questions, so we're focusing on that quite a bit.
I think that a misconception is that medical cannabis is dead. There are some amazing, and I'm not biased, but my sample is Los Angeles more. I know the Los Angeles market more than I know the Northern California market, but there are some amazing dispensaries there that are actually aggregating data, studying, talking to people, doing intakes, and actually putting their hearts and their souls into helping people. I know that it has been tough for the small operator and the medicine maker to get those products into stores, and I urge us to figure out a way to strengthen the medical market and bring it back to true medicine. And we need to have a safe place where somebody can come to California and they can make informed decisions about the best they can do for their medical condition. How would I know that Care by Design would put my Crohn's disease into remission? I was living in Florida and I just heard CBD in the wind, and suddenly Los Angeles. This is where it was happening. A company like Cannabis was making this medicine for such a long time. So I urge us not to go down that pipeline of, oh, it's all recreational, it's all adult use. Let's start being more conscious of the medical market, and I think we should praise and honor the true medicine makers. Not these monopolistic crazy people in Los Angeles, but the people that were actually providing medicine to patients.
All right, well, I think, I'm sure I forgot to ask something awesome, but we've long outstripped the cold medicine at this point. So I think what I would like to say is I would like to thank everybody for listening. I'm not sure if anything was to be learned here, but I just wanted to have sort of a fun discussion, and I thank you all for sticking around for it. And I want to thank our esteemed panel.